Great to see King Charles III back in action.
What the hell is the Prime Minister going on about?
Get out of my pub! Go on! Get out of my pub!
Keir Starmer, Keir, why do you keep inviting millions of refugees in the country when there's 1.3 million people waiting for housing?
Sir Keir Starmer, Your Majesty.
Your Majesty. The next general election. A moment the country needs. But if the police decide to issue me with a fixed penalty notice, I would, of course, do the right thing and step down.
Is Britain still the land of free voices, or has it turned into something darker? In just 3 weeks, 900 arrests have shaken the nation. Not drug lords, not violent criminals, but farmers, mothers, pensioners and veterans. Ordinary people whose only crime was to stand up and say no to Keir Starmer's harsh new rules. And now, behind the heavy walls of Buckingham Palace, King Charles is furious. He has confronted the Prime Minister directly, demanding answers. Why is Britain's leader treating his own citizens like enemies? Why are grieving families, village elders, and peaceful voters being dragged away under the banner of non-compliance? The King's fury is no longer a whisper. It's a storm breaking through the palace corridors. But will Starmer listen, or has Britain crossed the point of no return? The story unfolding in Britain today feels more like a warning from history than a headline from the present. In just 21 days, 900 arrests have been recorded under Keir Starmer's so-called emergency stability measures. And who are these people filling up detention centres? Not violent gangs, not foreign agents, but ordinary Britons, farmers in their fields, parents at council meetings, and elderly veterans at silent marches. Arrested not for violence, but for questioning, for dissent, for refusing to bow their heads when ordered to comply. The spark was a new wave of economic measures, rushed through Parliament with little debate and less transparency. Among the most explosive, a revaluation of farmland inheritance tax, suddenly inflating land prices to crushing levels. Families already grieving the loss of a parent or grandparent now face impossible bills from the tax man. Pay the government or sell land that's been in your bloodline for centuries. For Britain's rural communities, this isn't just policy, it's an execution order for their way of life. And so, the protests began. Quiet vigils outside barns, farmers chaining themselves to their tractors, mothers writing signs that read, "Let us live," veterans in wheelchairs holding banners that simply said, "Not for this." Peaceful resistance, simple human voices against what they saw as cruelty. But Starmer's government did not come with open ears. It came with shields, batons and vans. Riot squads in helmets marched into villages as if they were hostile territory. Elderly farmers were dragged out of barns like criminals. Teenagers were thrown into vans for shouting, "This is wrong." Entire communities were stunned, yet the crackdown only grew stronger. What made this moment different wasn't just the arrests, it was the speed, the scale, the cold efficiency. 900 in 3 weeks. That is not scattered law enforcement. That is a system. That is an operation. And for the first time in his reign, King Charles is said to have watched with horror as his people, his subjects, were treated like enemies of the state. According to palace insiders, the king was shown videos of weeping families in Kent, of veterans restrained in Essex, of mothers arrested in Yorkshire. His reaction was fierce. He slammed his hand on his desk and called it what it was, tyranny in plain sight. Those words, whispered by aides, are now echoing across Britain. Tyranny. A word the monarchy rarely utters. But Charles did more than rage. He picked up the phone and confronted his Prime Minister directly. Insiders claim the King's warning was clear. The people's patience is not infinite. Push them too far and the nation itself may break. You are testing the fabric of unity, Charles is rumoured to have said. And if trust is lost, it cannot be restored. For a monarch bound by constitutional restraint, these are no ordinary words. They are a warning shot from the symbolic head of the nation to the man wielding real power. But how did Starmer respond? With defiance. Days later, in Glasgow, he dismissed the King's anger as theatrics. Then he doubled down. "We will not tolerate disruption disguised as protest. Anyone who seeks to divide our unity will face the full force of the law." It was not just a message to protesters, it was a challenge to the Crown itself. Starmer has made his position clear. He will not bend, not to the people, not to the palace. This standoff has shaken Britain's identity to its core. For centuries, the monarchy has been the silent guardian of national unity, staying above politics. But what happens when silence feels like complicity? When the government begins arresting its own people in waves, does the king have a duty to act? These are no longer academic questions. They are being asked in pubs, in churches, in mosques, in town halls. And every day that passes without a resolution, Britain slides further into uncharted territory. Already, signs of resistance are spreading. In Cornwall, candlelit marches stretch through entire villages. In Birmingham, mosques have opened their doors to offer legal aid to arrested families. In London, tens of thousands marched silently past Parliament, carrying signs that read, "We are not afraid." These movements are peaceful, but the pressure is growing. Every mother handcuffed, every farmer dragged from his field, every veteran silenced by force only fuels the fire. And at the centre of it all stand two men, one who holds power and one who holds the nation's conscience. Keir Starmer, the architect of this crackdown. King Charles, the monarch wrestling with his silence. The clash between them is no longer hidden, it is the storm gathering above Britain. And the question that now lingers in the hearts of millions is as sharp as it is terrifying. Is this still a free country? Or has Britain finally crossed into something else entirely? The fury sweeping across Britain is no longer just a murmur in the countryside. It has become a roar that even the walls of Westminster cannot ignore. 900 people in 3 weeks. That number alone is staggering, but it is not the number that terrifies communities. It is the message behind it. Starmer's government has declared that dissent itself is now a crime. Farmers who refused to sign compliance forms have been arrested. Mothers who questioned council decisions on heating costs have been dragged away in front of their children. Veterans who stood silently with banners have been handcuffed and charged with undermining stability. Britain has always prided itself on debate, on free speech, on the right to protest peacefully. But today, those rights are treated as disruptions, as risks, as crimes. The government insists that these arrests are necessary for order. But order for whom? That is the question tearing through every community meeting and every family gathering. In Norfolk, a grandmother was fined for hosting what authorities called an unauthorised assembly. Her so-called assembly was nothing more than a dozen villagers in her garden discussing how to petition Parliament. In Manchester, a teenager was detained after posting a video criticising the new taxes. His parents were threatened with prosecution for failing to stop him. In Brighton, a priest was warned by police that sermons discussing justice could be interpreted as incitement. These are not isolated mistakes. They are signs of a system that is tightening its grip day by day. And in this growing darkness, Buckingham Palace has become a beacon of both hope and fear. Hope, because people believe King Charles sees what is happening. Fear, because if he stays silent, it will confirm that no one in power is willing to protect them. Petitions demanding royal intervention are flooding the palace, signed by thousands each day. Crowds gather outside its gates, holding candles and signs. "Speak now, Your Majesty." For the first time in generations, the monarchy is not simply a ceremonial symbol. It has become the last line of moral defence. Inside the palace, however, the atmosphere is tense. Senior advisors are reportedly split down the middle. Some argue that Charles must remain neutral, reminding him that the monarchy has no legal power to interfere with Parliament. Others believe neutrality is no longer an option. If silence allows democracy to die, one insider is quoted as saying, then silence itself becomes complicity. The king himself is said to be deeply unsettled, torn between his duty to the constitution and his duty to his people. Every day he receives letters from farmers' families, from mothers, from veterans, pleading with him to speak. And every day he faces the same impossible question. Should a king stand aside while his nation cries out? Meanwhile, Starmer's inner circle shows no sign of retreat. Leaked memos reveal that his advisors believe the storm will pass, that the public will eventually accept the new normal. In private discussions, the crackdown is described not as temporary enforcement, but as a necessary reconditioning of the population. Those words, necessary reconditioning, have sent shivers through every household that has heard them. Because what does that mean, if not the reshaping of an entire nation by force? Communities are already beginning to resist in ways unseen for decades. In Yorkshire, farmers are building makeshift camps to shield their land from confiscation. In Birmingham, networks of churches and mosques have united to offer safe spaces for people hiding from arrest warrants. In Scotland, secret town hall meetings are being organised, where locals debate strategies to fight the crackdown through courts and petitions. These movements are still peaceful, but beneath the calm surface lies a growing anger that could, at any moment, break into something far more dangerous. This is why King Charles's role has become so critical. His words, if spoken, would carry more than ceremonial weight. They would be a rallying cry, a signal to millions that their suffering has been seen, that their voices matter. But every day he delays, the situation grows worse. And Starmer knows it. By mocking the king's fury as theatrics, he sent a cold message not only to the monarchy, but to the people themselves. The government will not bend. Not to protests, not to petitions, not even to the Crown. That defiance is shaking Britain's very identity. The balance between government, monarchy, and people has always been fragile, built on trust and respect. But when one side breaks that trust, when laws are weaponised against the very people they are meant to serve, the entire system begins to unravel. Britain now stands at the edge of that unravelling. Communities feel abandoned, the monarchy feels cornered, and the government feels untouchable. That is not a recipe for stability. That is a recipe for collapse. The coming days will be decisive. Will the king finally break his silence with a public address, risking political backlash, but reclaiming moral leadership? Or will Starmer tighten his grip further, betting that fear will outweigh resistance? One thing is certain. Britain is no longer standing still. The ground beneath the nation is shifting, and the clash between Crown and government is no longer a question of if. It is a question of when. Britain is now a country split in two, those who fear speaking and those who refuse to be silenced. Every day, the gap grows wider. With 900 arrests in just 3 weeks, what began as isolated protests has turned into a nationwide resistance. Villages, towns, and even cities are waking up to the reality that no one is safe from Starmer's crackdown. And yet, instead of quelling the unrest, each arrest is fueling it. The people are no longer afraid, they are angry. And that anger is spilling into the streets. In Essex, farmers have blockaded entire roads with tractors, refusing to let government vehicles through. In Cornwall, mothers have formed human chains outside schools, daring police to drag them away in front of their children. In London, tens of thousands marched past Downing Street in complete silence, their signs speaking louder than words, "We will not bow." Even in Scotland and Wales, where support for the government was once stronger, communities are now openly defying the new laws. The crack in Starmer's authority is widening into a fracture that may soon split the nation in two. But as the resistance grows, so too does the government's desperation. Leaked documents from the Home Office reveal discussions of deploying the military to assist in controlling protests if the police are overwhelmed. Officially, this has been denied. But the very fact it was considered tells a chilling story. Starmer is prepared to escalate. For many, this is no longer about taxes or farmland. It is about survival in a country where the government treats its own citizens as enemies. And through it all, King Charles remains trapped in a constitutional nightmare. Inside Buckingham Palace, the pressure has become unbearable. Advisors warn him daily that speaking out would be unprecedented, dangerous, even reckless. Yet every morning, the king is handed reports of new arrests, new protests, new pleas from his people. Letters pour in from across the nation, some written in shaky handwriting from elderly pensioners, others scrawled in desperation from jailed farmers. They all carry the same plea: do not let this go on. Charles, a man who has spent decades preparing for a reign of service, now faces the test of his lifetime. Sources inside the palace suggest the king is no longer merely considering speaking. He is drafting words that could shatter the silence and change the course of the crisis. A public address is being discussed, one that would not seek to dismantle the government, but to remind Britain of what it is supposed to be: a free country, a nation of rights, not repression. Yet every word carries risk. A misstep could spark a constitutional crisis. A single sentence could ignite a clash between Crown and Parliament. Meanwhile, Starmer's camp grows ever more ruthless. In Glasgow, he mocked protesters again, calling them agitators trying to sabotage unity. In Manchester, he insisted that stability will not be compromised, even as legal experts warned that his new laws strip citizens of basic rights. To his allies, this is strength. To his critics, it is authoritarianism in its purest form. And to the people, it is proof that their Prime Minister will not stop until every voice of dissent has been crushed. The situation has become so dire that even international voices are beginning to notice. European leaders are quietly expressing alarm. Newspapers in France, Germany, and Italy run front-page stories asking the same haunting question: is Britain still a democracy? Videos of the crackdown, farmers dragged from barns, veterans arrested in wheelchairs, teenagers detained for social media posts are going viral across the continent. Britain, once admired for its resilience and freedom, now looks like a cautionary tale. And yet, within the nation, hope still clings to one fragile thread: the king. Every whisper of his anger, every rumour of his private outrage spreads like wildfire among the people. They believe he sees them, that he feels their pain, that he will not allow Britain to slide quietly into tyranny. But belief alone is not enough. The nation waits for his voice. And the longer that voice is withheld, the more dangerous the silence becomes. The stage is set for a showdown unlike anything Britain has faced in modern times. On one side, a prime minister tightening his grip, with laws, arrests, and force. On the other, a monarch torn between tradition and duty, between silence and conscience. And caught in the middle, millions of citizens asking the same desperate question: who will stand for us? The world is watching. The people are waiting. And Britain stands on the edge of a moment that could define its future for generations. The next move, whether by King Charles, Keir Starmer, or the people themselves, will decide whether this nation remains a free democracy or becomes something else entirely. The tension gripping Britain has reached a boiling point. Every village, town, and city is now aware of the storm brewing between Keir Starmer and King Charles. 900 arrests in just 3 weeks have transformed ordinary citizens into symbols of resistance. Mothers chained to council buildings, farmers refusing to leave their barns, veterans in wheelchairs holding banners. They are no longer isolated stories. They are the embodiment of a nation teetering on the edge. And all eyes now turn to Buckingham Palace, waiting for the king to speak. King Charles is said to be working tirelessly, drafting an address that could define not only his reign, but the very future of the United Kingdom. According to palace insiders, every word is weighed carefully. It must condemn injustice without breaking constitutional boundaries, inspire hope without inciting violence, and remind the nation of its freedoms without directly challenging the government's authority. It is a high-wire act, and the pressure is immense. Advisors are split. Some urge caution, warning that any misstep could provoke Starmer into further crackdown. Others argue that moral courage is now more important than protocol. The palace is tense, the king restless, and the nation waiting with bated breath. Meanwhile, Starmer is undeterred. He continues to portray the crackdown as necessary, claiming that those arrested are undermining national unity. His government has begun drafting plans to expand detention facilities and implement stricter monitoring measures, signalling that the 900 arrests may only be the beginning. In local communities, fear mixes with defiance. Town halls are barricaded. Villagers hold secret meetings. Churches, mosques, and schools offer legal aid to those facing charges. The country is awakening to the reality that the government may now see dissent as a crime. The battle lines are clear. On one side, Starmer, with a growing inner circle of yes-men and legal strategists confident in the belief that the public will eventually comply. On the other, King Charles, struggling with constitutional constraints, but increasingly aware that inaction could mean complicity. And caught in the middle, the British people, whose patience has limits and whose courage is growing daily. Social media is flooded with clips of protests, arrests, and silent marches. Across the country, citizens are defying curfews, posting petitions, and organising grassroots campaigns. The spark of rebellion, once isolated, has become a roaring flame. As tension escalates, whispers of a historic address by King Charles grow louder. If delivered, it would be the first direct public statement by a British monarch on a political crisis in nearly a century. Its timing is critical. Too soon, and it risks inflaming violence. Too late, and the nation could be lost to fear and compliance. According to insiders, the king is acutely aware that millions of eyes are on him, not just in the United Kingdom, but worldwide. Every word, every pause, every gesture will be dissected, interpreted, and remembered. The fate of Britain's freedom may hinge on this moment. At the same time, Starmer continues to tighten his grip, sending a chilling message that the government will not be intimidated by protests, petitions, or royal warnings. Videos show riot squads moving through villages, families detained for questioning, and communities living under a shadow of fear. But the more he pushes, the more resistance grows. People are organising in ways previously unimaginable. Networks of citizens are forming across towns and cities, exchanging legal advice, planning peaceful resistance, and demanding accountability. The people have begun to reclaim power in ways that even the government may not fully anticipate. The question now is simple, yet terrifying. Who will blink first? Will Starmer continue down this path of authoritarian enforcement, risking full-scale civil unrest? Will King Charles intervene, delivering a historic address that restores hope and galvanises the nation? Or will Britain be forced to endure a slow erosion of freedom, one arrest at a time, as fear replaces liberty? The next moves are crucial, and the world is watching. Britain stands at a crossroads. Its streets echo with the voices of the oppressed. Its villages tremble under the weight of enforced compliance. Its palace corridors buzz with the deliberations of a king torn between duty and conscience. And in the centre of it all, a prime minister testing the limits of power, a monarch preparing to speak, and a people no longer willing to be silenced. The nation waits for a decisive moment, A moment that could either restore freedom, ignite rebellion, or plunge Britain into its most dangerous crisis in modern history. History is watching, Britain is waiting, and the question hanging over the nation is clear: who will save it from itself? Thank you.